We are live now on the air. We're back with Joe Baldwin, and I'm Max Avery, back on Max Talks Movies. And today we will be doing a Star Wars villains ranking. As hopefully you guys know, I'm like the biggest Star Wars fan. I always talk to Joe when we went to school together, just literally all the time. And it was finally fun to do a Star Wars ranking. I did a Star Wars ranking, I think, before of Ty, but now we're getting into it with Joe. So this is a really, really exciting ranking. So this ranking also is not just the movies. We're including all the TV shows, Rebels, Clone Wars, Mandalorian, also involved in the Star Wars villain ranking. It would be pretty tough to make a 10 just with the films. So we have added Clone Wars, Rebels, and Mandalorian onto this list. Before we get going, we have some honorable mentions. Joe, what is your honorable mentions that couldn't make your top 10 villains list?
I've got two honorable mentions. I just remembered my other one. My first honorable mention is Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars, because I love her as a character, but I really the reason I couldn't put her on my top 10 is because I love Asajj Ventress as like an anti-hero more than I loved her as a villain.
Yeah,
I feel like her what made her an interesting character really came out when she was betrayed by Dooku. And I think that was such a fantastic story arc, and I will talk about it a little later. The only problem is I just think that her turn from total villainy, being a Sith, to being a little bit more of a bounty hunter, that part of her story was much more interesting than when she was working for Dooku. My second honorable mention is the Emperor. I believe he's the big bad of the original trilogy. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, he was in control. Like the prequels, he has this entire puppet master plan, but he doesn't do like a lot. And you might say, what about Rise of Skywalker? And I would say, I don't like Rise of Skywalker, so don't get to the point. So yes, the Emperor is a fantastic villain, but he is sort of the hulking big bad. When you actually meet him, it's much more, I don't know. He doesn't do a lot, and I like seeing my villains in the story more frequently.
Yeah. And I'll move into my honorable mentions. My first one is Dryden Voss from Solo. A character that I actually really enjoyed because Paul Bettany was the actor playing him in Solo. I thought he was a pretty different villain than what we've gotten before. The fact that he was actually working underneath Maul. And I don't know, his look was really cool. His fighting style was really, really interesting. And I think that he just didn't get enough screen time in the movie because they brought him in when they brought Ron Howard in to finish shooting the movie. So it did feel like at times a very forced villain. But he had a very interesting connection to Kira, and he died. There's a reason why he's important, because he does pop up in a cameo in that last season of Clone Wars when Maul was having a meeting with his group. So he's definitely important. And my other one is Cad Bane. I couldn't find him on this list. For me, I think he's from the Clone Wars TV show. Really, really great character. Again, I love Cad Bane. But as you said earlier about getting enough screen time, I just don't think his character got enough screen time whatsoever. He would kind of pop in and pop out of particular seasons. You'd get like maybe one arc every couple seasons, and his arcs weren't the most fascinating. His character looked cool. I think that seeing him possibly in live action would actually really help him a lot, but he really wasn't into the show as much as I needed him to be a complete villain. So he was just working for Palpatine just for money purposes, not just because he doesn't really care about the Empire Republic. So interesting perspective from him, but he just can't make my list. But let's get into our top 10. Your number 10, Joe, is?
My number 10 is Kylo Ren. A villain I believe would make it much further up my list if it weren't for The Rise of Skywalker.
Wow.
I did not hate that movie coming out of the theater as much as I did in conversations, but the more I talk about it, the more I think it really didn't work as a movie. or as a finale, or as really anything. And I think it totally destroys Kylo Ren's character. That being said, Kylo in the first two of the new trilogy, Episode 7 and Episode 8, I really enjoyed. I think a lot of people were expecting him to be just like a knockoff Vader, and he kind of is, but they really play into it, which is he wants to be Darth Vader, but he's so clearly not. He doesn't have the same skills, the same temperament that Darth Vader does, even though he looks up to Darth Vader so much. And I think it was very interesting. His relationship with Rey was also very personal. And I think sometimes in Star Wars villains, it's more about war tactics, like what's the moral good versus the moral evil, and you don't always get the personal connections. So when you do, that is very powerful. Again, I think them kissing in Rise of Skywalker was really, really bad. And I think if Rise of Skywalker was just a more coherent movie overall, and they did more justice with his character, I believe he would be a much more top-tier villain. But alas, that did not happen, so he is relegated to number 10.
Yeah. I love your point. I mean, Rise of Skywalker, again, the more I watch it, the more I talk about it as well. I'm kind of on your side on that movie as well. My number 10 is Thrawn from Rebels. So Thrawn has had a lot of the biggest, most famous canon books out there for Star Wars. And he did come in the last couple seasons of Rebels, and he was so great. He is, again, a Grand Admiral, and he is working, obviously, the biggest guy before Vader and Palpatine, basically, in the Empire. And the way that his not relationship, but the way his chemistry works with the rebellion people, like, Ezra, Sabine, and those guys works really, really well. And one of the main reasons why that Rebels finale between Ezra and Thrawn works is because they both have had a lot of built-up aggression really against each other. And Ezra's just a kid, and Thrawn always tried to use that against him. And I think Thrawn is a character that I really think will pop up in The Mandalorian, possibly, if we find out results of what happened with Ezra and Thrawn when they got picked up. What happened? I'm not going to spoil, but what happened to them at the end of Rebels? We don't know if that's going to set up both of them coming back, possibly in live action form, because Rebels is done. So I hope Thrawn is a character who we see continue in Star Wars. The books are really, really great for him as well. So Thrawn's a really great character who I think really could be in The Mandalorian, possibly, if they tie up the knot from Rebels. I
would like to comment on Thrawn, because he was someone I considered, but I haven't watched Rebels as thoroughly as you have. But I have read one of Thrawn's books, and he's a fantastic villain. Of course, I couldn't give him a spot based off the books, as the books are no longer canon, or at least the book that I read is no longer canon.
Right. Yeah.
I think he's an amazing character. I just haven't seen him in the forms that we're discussing.
Yeah.
That are eligible for this list.
Yeah.
All right. My number 9 is Jabba the Hutt. Someone I was a little surprised to see on my list, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, I think Jabba is sort of an underlying force. Like he never does a lot. He is a crime lord. Everything that Jabba puts together, it's usually through bounty hunters. But I really enjoy bounty hunters. I think they're one of the more interesting parts of the Star Wars universe. I think they always get cooler designs. They always just get these interesting stories. And it always shakes up. It's not just a Sith versus a Jedi. Bounty hunters have specific sets of skills. And I think Jabba commanding all of the bounty hunters together is very powerful and a little underrated. Again, he doesn't do a lot, but his problems with Han Solo set up the opening of Return of the Jedi. Yeah. And I don't know if this is controversial or not, because I don't know how everyone feels about Return of the Jedi, but I really like Return of the Jedi, and the opening with them trying to free Han Solo from Jabba's palace. It's actually one of my favorite parts. So I decided to give Jabba my number 9 slot.
And he is my number 9 as well. Funny about that.
Huh.
And I was going to bring that up too, about your point. I don't think it's controversial. I also think I actually have Return of the Jedi over New Hope in my opinion. I actually really love Return of the Jedi. It was always my favorite of the original, but then when I really sat down and watched them growing up, you can definitely feel like Empire is the way better movie. But I mean, not just the opening, but really Jabba the Hutt's the escape from Jabba's palace really is the first 40 minutes of the movie. And a lot of people forget about that because obviously it's the Luke versus Vader fight at the end. Really, the first 25% of the movie is just Luke, Leia, and Han trying to escape Jabba's palace. And that's why you're going to have him on this list, because he pops in as a cameo in both Phantom Menace and New Hope. And that's the only time you've seen him in the movies. But then again, Return of the Jedi. And he's a really, really fascinating character. The fact that all these people work for him, as you said, bounty hunters, that's how we get Boba Fett. And he's definitely a fascinating character because the Hutts are everyone knows who the Hutts are when they're coming on to Tatooine. Not just in the movies, but Solo also hints at Han and Jabba's relationship. Even the Mandalorian and Clone Wars has a lot more background on the Hutts, his kid Zero. So there's a lot more background on the characters, and they're famous for a reason in everyone, because everyone has to watch out for the Hutts. But Jabba's a fascinating character. I love him and C-3PO back and forth in Return of the Jedi. A really fun character whose death was pretty gruesome from Leia. But I think it's a very fascinating character. And it was tough for Luke and Han to escape there because they worked. I mean, it took them the first 25% of the movie to get out of there. So again, I really, really do really love Return of the Jedi. And he's one of the big reasons why. Your number 8, Joe. My
number 8 is Pre Vizsla, leader of Death Watch. Death Watch is such a cool part of Clone Wars. I will be honest, my list has a very heavy Clone Wars bias. But Pre Vizsla is such a great character. Death Watch as a whole is a great group, and him being the leader he really exemplifies what the group stand for, which is radical violence. But that is so interesting in relation to the peaceful Mandalore trying to remain independent, neutral in the war between the Republicans and the Separatists. I feel like this shouldn't matter as much as it does, but his design is so awesome. The Darksaber, one of my favorite things that just pops up throughout all Star Wars. Anytime I see it, I'm like, that's the Darksaber. There it is. I think Pre Vizsla in the Clone Wars, he has a lot of great moments, especially when he teams up with Maul, and then his fight with Maul is like one of the best action set pieces throughout the entire series. In addition, he has such a powerful impact on the rest of the franchise. I mean, I believe the Clan Vizsla comes up in Rebels, comes up in The Mandalorian, and that also might be Disney seeing how much people like Mandalorian stuff and just doing more Mandalorian stuff in general. But the history of Mandalore is so interesting, and because it was a war culture at one point, and then it turns into this peaceful culture, and then it turns back into this warrior culture. Yeah. And Pre Vizsla is sort of the one who's keeping Mandalore's warrior culture alive through this period of peace.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to add on, because he also literally just missed my list as well. Voiced by Jon Favreau, too. The fact that his battle with Maul is easily one of the best parts of Clone Wars. And
5, right?
Yeah, around there. Yeah, 5. Yeah, 5 sounds right. And very fascinating character. Maul obviously overtakes them. But as you said, the Darksaber looks like it's going to be a big part of the Mandalorian now heading forward. Right. Also, it seems like it was the Death Watch people who actually picked up our Mandalorian in the show. And when they showed the backstory, they had the Death Watch patch on. So they're really connecting things that we could see them pop up in future seasons. But again, he couldn't make my list just because he really had one arc in the entire show, really one main arc. So I couldn't put him on here. My number 8 is Boba Fett. Boba Fett is my number 8. Boba Fett is a really great character for a lot of reasons, just really because of the mystery factor of his character. Obviously, if you just watch the original trilogy, he pops in the special edition as a cameo in New Hope. He pops in. The fact that Vader, it looks like he's the most trustworthy bounty hunter for Vader, which means he's the most trustworthy, probably the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. If Vader is trusting him to take Han away in Empire Strikes Back. As again, we always keep saying his death was handled very poorly for how much people loved the character. He got a mini backstory basically in Attack of the Clones, and he was actually in Clone Wars. I actually liked him a lot in Clone Wars. Seeing young Boba, especially that arc of him, trying to kill Windu, like a multiple episode, and him being a bounty hunter from that young. I mean, it was very fascinating to see. But again, he wasn't really in it a lot. And I think that his character actually seems like it could grow if they do bring him back for Mandalorian, which could make him really rise up on this list. But again, he really isn't in it that much. Again, very small roles in the 3 movies that he was in. And then in Clone Wars, probably was the most screen time he's probably gotten in Star Wars so far, actually. So and that was him as a teenager. So again, I really do enjoy the character so much. And I'm really hoping he does pop in to Mandalorian this season. But again, great character, interesting backstory, seeing his father being decapitated by Windu, how that affected him. So interesting story and a great look too as well. Do you want to add on and move into your number 7?
I'm not going to add on as of now. My number 7 is the one and only General Grievous, commander of the droid army. Again, I am basing my placement of General Grievous here more so on the Clone Wars than on the prequels. Not because I have a negative perception of Grievous from the prequels, but truly because I watched all the prequels when I was a child, and it's been a very long time. I don't truly remember what he was like. I remember him more from Clone Wars. And in Clone Wars, he is a force to be reckoned with. He is one of the main villains. He is the villain for most arcs. The Jedi are always trying to capture him. He's always just barely escaping them. He has this sort of combination of tactical awareness while also just being mad and rash and making these decisions. His design is very cool, and I like that they really took advantage of it throughout Clone Wars. Also, his collecting lightsabers is something I think they mention in the prequels, but they really explore it in the Clone Wars. And I'm trying to think of the specific example that really puts General Grievous up there for me is the arc where Kit Fisto and Kit Fisto's ex-Padawan go to General Grievous's home and try to capture him. And I believe that is one of the saddest moments where Grievous kills Kit Fisto's Padawan and takes his lightsaber. Like, that's just moments like those. Grievous really knows how to hit people where it hurts. Even if he's not always victorious, he always finds a way to make the heroes still feel like they've lost.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting dynamic throughout the entire show.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to talk about him very soon. But my number 7 is actually a person that Joe had as an honorable mention, and that is Asajj Ventress coming in for me at number 7. I love this character from Clone Wars. And I'm shocked we haven't seen her pop up in anything else yet. Obviously, she could very soon. But I really love this character. I think that for most of the show, she's really just the Padawan, basically, to Dooku. And it looks like Dooku's trying to overthrow Palpatine, basically, because, Siths only work with a master and apprentice. And obviously Dooku portrayed that by having Asajj as she's basically an assassin, is what they basically call her throughout the show. She's got a really fascinating relationship with Anakin too, which I love, especially when Asajj and Ahsoka get tangled up, and Anakin's like, why is Ahsoka trusting Asajj? And that was kind of the true fall of Ahsoka with the Jedi, was the whole arc of her with Asajj as well, being a part of that, not just the main, obviously they think the criminal act that Ahsoka committed, but the people were already losing their faith by trusting Asajj. That was the big twist of Barriss in the show with Asajj, that she took Asajj's lightsabers. But obviously one of my favorite parts of Clone Wars is Dooku just telling Asajj, I'm done with you. You're going to be dead, blah, blah, blah. You have to handle Anakin and Obi-Wan by yourself, no help. Really, really heartbreaking for her, even though she's the villain of really one of the main villains of the show. And also her arc with the Night Sisters is really fascinating, her background. And then, her training Savage, who was a very fascinating character. And the fact that she trained him and then he just dropped her very fast. Just great powers as well. Really interesting lightsaber battles with her. Really distinct look. And I do have her more on this list than Joe. Obviously, now she definitely could be an anti-hero, but for me, I classify her as a villain for the majority of the show. And that's why she's my number 7. Joe, you want to add on to go into your number 6?
No, I feel like I mentioned why I didn't consider Ventress more so for my list, truthfully, just because I think her arc really gets going when her morals become less defined by Dooku. Star Wars is this battle between good and evil, and once she's no longer in the strictly evil category, I think that's when her character gets very interesting. My number 6 is Grand Moff Tarkin. I think he doesn't show up a lot, but he's a very menacing figure. I mean, for being one of the only characters I have on my list who's kind of just a regular human, just a general, a tactician, he's intensely scary. A younger version of him shows up in the Clone Wars. I think that was a very interesting setup, especially developing this relationship between him and Anakin. But I think in A New Hope, he is really the one calling the shots, whereas Vader is sort of this powerful enforcer who is the direct link from the Emperor. He's the Emperor's right hand, whereas Grand Moff Tarkin is actually the leader of the Death Star, the one calling the shots, the one giving the order to blow up Alderaan. I believe he's such just a powerful individual for someone who has no supernatural ability. He's a human, and he got to this level of callousness, and it's frankly scary.
Yeah. And again, as you brought it up earlier, he really was the big bad of New Hope. And people don't really think about that. Vader is not in the movie as much as you would probably remember as well. I mean, he's not really he maybe is in 20 minutes of the movie. And as you said, Tarkin and Leia have a great relationship in that movie too, blowing up the base. But as you said, like, Vader just does Tarkin's bidding, and Tarkin was controlling Vader for that movie, really. And again, I like that you brought up the Clone Wars episode or 2 where he was in, which was good. Again, I thought he was poorly handled in Rogue One. But again, that's just me. I'll move into my number 6, and I just brought up Rogue One. So let's talk about Orson Krennic, director Krennic, is a character that I love. Now, obviously, I have bias because Ben Mendelsohn is a top 3 actor, a favorite of mine. I love Ben Mendelsohn. But in general, Krennic is a fascinating villain for a lot of ways. Now, as you said earlier, he's just human. He's not a Jedi or a Sith or anything. But he was basically one of the head person to bring up the Death Star. He's the one who got the relationship with Galen Erso to build the Death Star. And then once Tarkin in Rogue One saw the success of the Death Star, he kind of shrugged off Krennic. So Krennic honestly was one of the big brains behind the construction of the Death Star, and it seems like it's one of the biggest Easter eggs now when you're looking back at it, New Hope, when that whole meeting scene with Vader chokes out the person. There's one empty seat, and that was for Krennic, which I thought was a very fascinating Easter egg now looking back. But I do love the character. I do have some flaws with him. He's very predictable and very at times generic. But I do love his music. One, I love his theme song. But as well, also, he's got a really interesting relationship with Galen. You think he's got some good in him, but then he just gets blown up and basically used by the Empire at the end of the movie. They just kill him, even though he's probably the brains behind the Death Star. And Tarkin just Tarkin knows how good Krennic is by killing him at the end of the movie. And also Krennic's scenes with Vader are also really, really good. And you see Krennic isn't really he's afraid of Vader, but he believes he's the rightful leader that could be the leader of the Empire. So really fascinating character, but power kind of got in his way at the end of the day, as did most of these villains on this list. Do you want to add on? And I have something to say before we go into our top fives. I
don't have a lot to say about Commander Krennic. I do believe that he is sort of the other side of the coin of Grand Moff Tarkin, but I just don't think he was explored quite as much in that movie. I did not remember him very well.
Yeah, that's before we get into our top five. Before we go to our top five, guys, please hit that like button. Everyone here, all the people that are watching this live, hit that like button. That's one of the best ways to support Mac Talks Movies. And also, guys, leave in your rankings and questions in the chat. We'll get to go to all the chat. We'll have, at the moment, any questions or chat related to Star Wars. We need you guys to put those in the comments in the chat right now. So then, by the way, when we're done this ranking, please put in some of Star Wars rankings. Are we missing some of the villains that you guys really loved? We're going to talk about some of the big ones right now because Joe is about to give us his number 5.
My number 5, you briefly mentioned him earlier. My number 5 is Asajj Ventress. First off, just look at that name, Asajj Ventress. I think his arc with the Night Sisters it's as much his arc as it is Ventress's. His training from being sort of this nobody in a farm town to having to duel his brother in order to get this spot of power, to being trained by Ventress in the most brutal way possible, then to be trained by Dooku in an equally brutal way, and then being forced to choose between them. His whole arc, he's treated as like this pawn. And there are a lot of characters in Star Wars who are just pawns and are then discarded with. He decides not to be a pawn anymore. He takes them both out and he sets off on his own journey. And I think that scene where both Dooku and Ventress are calling on him to take out the other one, that's a very powerful scene in Clone Wars. There are so many powerful scenes in Clone Wars. It's just a great show overall. But then his journey for Maul, I mean, even the reveal that Maul was his brother was so cool because many people's complaints with the Phantom Menace were just they had such a cool villain, they got rid of him, and then that introduction back into Maul and their whole brother dynamic, or as Maul puts it, student-teacher dynamic throughout is so powerful. And even though Savage is absolutely a villain, he murders people, he takes over Mandalore. His death is heartbreaking when the Emperor comes and realizes that Maul is alive, but he doesn't kill Maul. He goes for Savage because he knows that will hurt Maul more. Yeah. And it's, I don't know. It's just a great overall scene. I think Savage is more of a villain than Ventress, and that's why I gave him this slot instead of her, even though their arcs are so interconnected. And then Savage goes on and he creates his own arc, which is also so great.
And again, he also trained with Ventress and Dooku and Maul in Clone Wars, like craziness. His death was also very powerful too. Palpatine killing him was really great in my opinion as well. I'll move into my top 5, and again, a lot of these people now. Actually, my 5 through 2 are most of my 5 through 2 are people Joe's already talked about or hinted at. So that's fascinating to see here. My number 5 is General Grievous from Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars. Now, obviously, I'll bring a lot more. He talked a lot about Clone Wars. The reason why he's on my top 5 is honestly because of Revenge of the Sith. And again, if you know me very closely, I'm one of the biggest Revenge of the Sith fans out there. It's my second favorite Star Wars movie. So I love Revenge of the Sith, and he's actually one of the big reasons why. His character is so fascinating in Revenge of the Sith. The fact that he's trained as a Sith by Dooku. He's trained again. We found another person that Dooku has trained, but Grievous is all basically robot, and he picks and he fights with Jedi lightsabers. Like, what is going on? A very different character. He's very physical. Like, the way he moves around is really physical. He has a very cool escape scene from Obi-Wan and Anakin in the opening bit of Revenge of the Sith. And then he pops in that big lightsaber battle with Obi-Wan, which was all basically a distraction for Palpatine to destroy the Republic in the capital. So move Grievous and the Separatists far away. Grievous moved them to Mustafar. And his battle with Obi-Wan was so great. When he's rolling around, when he's on that vehicle, it's so awesome. His death is very lackluster, but I love the character. Clone Wars didn't really help him as much as I thought it should have. Obviously, they just called back the same line from Revenge of the Sith in his lightsaber battle with Obi-Wan again, which I thought was kind of weak. But again, his character is fascinating because now you get to see him kill Jedi. We didn't really see him get to kill anyone in Revenge of the Sith. He just popped in and died halfway through. But because he just seems like a distraction from Palpatine, from Anakin in that movie. But in Clone Wars, he's a much bigger deal to the Republic, which is, again, a very fascinating take. But I do love General Grievous. And I love that he's just George Lucas's cock, basically, is the character, which I think is hilarious. But let's move into our top 4. It's getting really dicey now. Joe, give us your number 4.
My number 4, I was surprised I had it my number 4 because the first time I thought about this character, I was like, kind of same with a couple other Star Wars villains. He didn't do much. And then I thought about it, and I realized my number 4 is Boba Fett because I'm gonna start with the basics. Great design. That is what makes people love Boba Fett so much. He has this amazing design. He's the one who really brings us into the world of the Mandalorians, and it just kept going. But he's a badass. He shows up, takes down Solo, takes him to Jabba. I believe his fall into the Sarlacc pit was very poorly handled. But the reason I put him so high was because of him as a kid on the Clone Wars. Because I think his vendetta against Mace Windu is so well done. I think, especially because he's a clone. He's basically a clone, which is that Jango Fett made a deal, which was that like they could clone him, but he would get one clone to raise as a son. And when he's infiltrating the Republic, he's surrounded by all of these people who look just like him, who are his, as the clones say, they're his brothers. And he does, you can see like this look of sadness on his face when he actually ends up betraying them and leaving them for dead. But at the same time, his conviction to take revenge on Mace Windu is so strong and fairly well deserved, because like if you think about Attack of the Clones, Mace Windu very casually just murders this man by decapitating him in front of his son. And we never really saw the ramifications of that until Boba's arc in the Clone Wars. I think I've looked at some of the lost episodes because Clone Wars was supposed to last longer than 7 seasons. I believe there was a Cad Bane Boba Fett face-off, which I would kill to see animated. But just overall, I think his conflict between needing this revenge and also feeling this connection to the clones who work for the Republic is fascinating. And I don't think they delved into it quite enough, but I think then Boba also appears in other parts, and I think it actually does a really good job of kind of building up to him being a great bounty hunter someday.
Yeah, and I do love that character. Hoping Mandalorian brings him back because the death was very poorly handled, as I said earlier. My number 4 is Kylo Ren. So Kylo Ren for me is easily the best part of the sequel trilogy.
Absolutely.
I don't think anyone's really close. Now, a lot of people I love Rey, I love Finn, I love Poe. I don't really love those characters. I love Kylo Ren. And then you could obviously tell that Adam Driver was the best actor in in the cast, all of the new cast. Easily the best actor working. One of the best actors working in Hollywood right now. Kylo is a very interesting character where I believe that it's fascinating with me. Even though I like The Last Jedi the least out of the sequel trilogy, I think the best Kylo Ren is in The Last Jedi, in my opinion. It's really his movie in The Last Jedi. The first movie was really Rey and Finn's film with Kylo added in there. The fact that Kylo is Han Solo and Leia's kid is really, really interesting because we haven't really seen a half, Han doesn't have any Force abilities at all, mixed with Leia, who does obviously have Force abilities. How does a kid like that turn out? How powerful can they be? And you can kind of see Kylo already be thinking about the light side, even in Force Awakens. But him killing Han is one of the best scenes in the sequel trilogy in Force Awakens. I think it's a really great scene. And Kylo versus Rey in the woods is also great. But Last Jedi, he really comes into his own, manipulating Rey. But he does care about Leia. He didn't kill Leia when he didn't push the trigger. As you said, in my opinion, again, my biggest issue with Rise of Skywalker is the fact that they made Palpatine the big bad, because in my opinion, it needed to be Kylo very badly, because Kylo's already had multiple chances in the first 2 movies to go on the good side, but he chose not to on both occasions. He didn't save Han, and then he didn't save Rey. He wanted to have the power. So in my opinion, after watching Last Jedi, he was really the supreme leader. He was the big bad. And then in the first scene of Rise of Skywalker, he's back to doing someone else's doing, which I don't really like. But his character still is really good in his lightsaber battle with Rey. Both of them are really, really great. The one on the Death Star was really good, and the one where they're forced, they're not in the same room. I forgot what they call it. But again, I really enjoy both their lightsaber duels in The Rise of Skywalker. Really great character, easily the best theme in the sequel trilogy and the best character in the sequel trilogy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, you made so many great points for Kylo Ren. And honestly, if I was ignoring The Rise of Skywalker, easily top 5. But it's a movie, and they so just face plant the end of his arc, and I just can't ignore that. I loved everything up until the point where he turns good, because it comes so out of nowhere, and it felt like it was just kind of undeserved. Yep. And as much as I love the character, I can't pretend that didn't happen. As much as I would like to.
Your top 3 begins with.
Oh my God, this might be just like a little bit of a childhood bias in me, but my number 3 is Cad Bane.
Wow.
I love Cad Bane. I should tell you, I dressed up as Cad Bane for Halloween, and the mask was not great, but I still love the costume. Cad Bane, I believe Cad Bane's introduction is the epitome of show, don't tell. They needed a very important. They needed a skilled bounty hunter, and they needed to establish that. And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Cad Bane's first appearance is season finale, or at least towards the end of season.
Yeah.
And the way they establish Cad Bane is that he succeeds in his mission. And even though Anakin, who's one of the main characters of Clone Wars, is there and trying to prevent him from succeeding, Cad Bane still wins. They show how smart he is, how calculating he is, how he knows what he's doing. And then they go on and they tell stories in which Cad Bane almost wins and the Jedi then eventually take him. I think that's something that a lot of villains are missing, which is a success to prove to the audience how powerful they are. I believe also he doesn't have any force powers. He is truly just using gadgets, skills, blasters, and he takes on the Jedi with such ease. I think any arc that Cad Bane's in, I just liked it a little bit more. I don't the arc where Obi-Wan is going undercover. I think Cad Bane is fantastic in that. He shows that he does have standards, and some could argue that he's not a true villain because he doesn't take sides. But we did establish when we were making this list that bounty hunters count, and I love bounty hunters. So Cad Bane had to make my list at least at some point. Getting into number 3, I don't have any problem with it. I love him, and I think it's just he's such a great character, especially being an original character to the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and I'll add on to your point because he is not in my top 10, but my favorite arc, top 5 arc of Clone Wars, and my favorite Cad Bane arc was when Obi-Wan transformed into Racco Hardeen, and that's when he got the most kind of backstory on Cad Bane, like more personal about him, right, Joe?
Yeah.
So I really did like that arc as well. My number 3 is Darth Maul from the Phantom Menace and Clone Wars and Rebels and Solo, which was a great cameo. I'll talk about all those appearances in a bit. First, I'll talk about the movies. So Phantom Menace was obviously a big waste of his character, a very cool-looking character that didn't have basically any speaking lines, but he seems very tough. He kills a Jedi Master, basically, in Qui-Gon, but gets killed pretty easily by a Padawan in Obi-Wan, very easily, and he gets very, very easily killed at the end of Phantom Menace. Then you move him into, I'll just move it in order of the timeline, Clone Wars. And they bring him back in such a physicality way of him having the spider legs, basically. And then you find out that I love his arc just trying to kill Obi-Wan. That's his one thing on his mind once he gets killed in Phantom Menace was that he just wants to kill Obi-Wan. That's all he cares about is Obi-Wan. He has Savage as a relationship. And him and Ahsoka have a really interesting relationship at the end of Clone Wars, the season that we just got. The fact that Maul knows all of the plans that Sidious was making, and Ahsoka just doesn't believe him at the end of the season. And maybe if Ahsoka believes him, we have a completely different Star Wars because she doesn't, and they fight, and Maul gets captured. Everything kind of happens. He knows Order 66 is coming. And then I was actually shocked that he escapes, really, without Ahsoka at the end of the season, which is a great send-off for his character at the moment. Then Solo makes sense. I actually predicted before I watched that movie that so he was going to pop in because of what they set up in Clone Wars. And then Rebels was really great with the, what do you call it? The Sith holocron. The fact of him and Ezra using each other to get what they want. And then obviously him versus Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan actually officially killing Maul. What a scene. One of my favorite scene out of every TV show we've gotten so far in Star Wars with the Maul Obi-Wan lightsaber. Not really a duel, just a mental battle. And old Obi-Wan wins, and he looks after Luke. What a great scene. Maul knows that Luke's the next chosen one, basically, and it's a very powerful scene. Sadly, probably won't see him again unless we get a Darth Maul or a Crimson Dawn TV show. But what a great character. He's easily in my top 3. Joe, you're number 2, or you want to add on? Is your number 2 Darth Maul?
Max, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Yep.
there are times on this show where I have purposefully made controversial picks.
He's not in your top.
If we were going by top 10 Star Wars villains, just of all time, my list would be very different. Of course, we were going by my top 10 favorite Star Wars villains, which means that Darth Vader is my number 2.
Oh my god!
I know, right? This is crazy, and I'm saying this on YouTube.
Yep. I
mean, I always hate when I have to do this because I love Darth Vader, and there's a reason that Darth Vader is at my number 2 slot. His entire arc throughout, everything is fantastic. I'm less thinking about Anakin, more so about the original trilogy. Darth Vader, just throughout, it's as much his story as it is Luke's. It's so he is one of the most quintessential movie villains of all time, and there's a reason for that. Max, you've got to stop. Okay. Where was I? Every scene, every interaction he has is very emotional, especially on rewatches where you understand the dynamic between him and Obi-Wan so much more. That fight is emotional. I mean, one of the most iconic movie moments of all time. I'm your father. Insane. Every duel he has means something. What? Stop looking at me like that. There's subjective, and this is me talking subjectively. Darth Vader is objectively the best Star Wars villain. Yeah, am I missing anything? Yes, his eventual redemption is not true redemption because he doesn't get forgiven. He understands what he did was wrong, and he does something in order to fix that, but he doesn't get to live happily ever after, and I think that's a very important lesson. Okay, I'm done.
Oh, okay. Well, nowhere he'll be on my list, but my number 2, I can't believe he was not in your top 10, and that is Palpatine. Darth Sidious is easily number 2, very close to number 1 in my opinion. What a freaking character he is. Let's just go in timeline order again. The prequels, you really see him be the mastermind. He seems pretty one-dimensional, in my opinion, in the original trilogy. He obviously just popped up in his cameo in Empire, and then he really comes to full force in Return of the Jedi. But you see him making all these plans to destroy the Republic, really starting with the first movie. Phantom Menace, not New Hope. The fact that he gives the current chancellor, he kicks him off of the Senate with the help of Padme. That really sets him into full force of being the chancellor for the rest of the prequels. Then in the second movie, I think I hate Attack of the Clones, but again, Jar Jar gives emergency powers to Palpatine, which gives him even more power. While he really starts to build that relationship with Anakin in 2. And then he really, again, I love Revenge of the Sith. So he's one of my favorite parts of Revenge of the Sith. Not just his relationship with Anakin, but his manipulation of Anakin. The fact that he learned from Plagueis that you can save anyone you want with these powers, and Anakin knows that Padme is gonna die based off of his nightmares. So Palpatine uses that against him, and all of that happened. Anakin's the one who really kills Padme. And Palpatine, again, Clone Wars, I thought Palpatine was underutilized in the Clone Wars TV show. Rebels, that was great. He was used amazingly in the last season of Rebels. And that's probably one of the best Palpatine we've ever gotten before. I love him in the last season of Rebels. If you haven't seen that last season of Rebels, please check it out, especially for Palpatine. It's really great. And again, the original trilogy, he does die off. But again, the worst part about it's not Ian McDiarmid's fault, who I thought is one of the best performances in Star Wars as Emperor, but the character was not necessary whatsoever in that much of a degree in Rise of Skywalker. One, it didn't really make a lot of sense. And again, I love the character, but it does knock it down. That's why it can't be the number one villain, honestly, is because of how they utilized him in Rise of Skywalker. Shocked he's not in your top 10 or even top 5. But let's get into our number one. I thought we had the same one. Now we don't.
Max, this would never be any fun if we always had the same number one.
Joe, I know your number one is now. I think I just talked about him. Tell us about him.
Yes, my number one is Darth Maul, or Maul, depending on when we're looking at it from.
Yeah.
I think this is a very important thing to note because I had to look. When I put this list down, I put Maul as number one, and I put Darth Vader as number 2, and I was like, how is that possible? I think it truly is. My childhood connection to Star Wars, I loved Star Wars when I watched it, but my childhood connection to Star Wars is the Clone Wars more so than it is the original trilogy. That might not be the same for everybody else, but
no,
it was such a big part of why I continued to like Star Wars, why it wasn't just one movie that I watched a really long time ago and I didn't understand why people liked it. The expansion of the world was so great, and I think Darth Maul, out of every villain in the Clone Wars, is the best villain in the Clone Wars. And that's different than, I understand that is different than being the greatest Star Wars villain, but I mean, I really enjoy every part of him being in the Clone Wars. I think, like you said, him in Phantom Menace is sort of a missed opportunity, even though it does set him up as such a great character, a great fighter. Once again, great design, and then he's killed, and a lot of people were disappointed by that. So they rectified that mistake by bringing him into the Clone Wars as this new villain. And I think his perspective is just between the Republic and the Separatists and the Sith and the Jedi, because he's been wronged by the Jedi and he's been betrayed by the Sith. There's so many different levels to his character that are so prevalent throughout everything he does. His relationship with Asajj Ventress, like I briefly mentioned earlier, is so well done, where Asajj sees him as a brother, Maul sees Asajj as a pupil, someone to be molded, someone to be shaped, which sort of goes back to people trying to take advantage of Asajj before. But when Asajj dies, Maul actually has an emotional reaction, and that's such a critical moment. That whole scene, as well as his desire to kill Obi-Wan throughout, I think, like I said, those personal types of connections in Star Wars are not everywhere, but when they are, they're extremely important. They're extremely key to the story.
Yeah.
Maul killing Duchess Satine, one of the saddest moments of the show, in my opinion. I've said that so many times in this list. And I mean, I didn't watch Rebels all the way through, but the parts of Rebels I paid the most attention to where Maul was prevalent. I think he has one of the most expansive runs throughout all of the Star Wars timelines. He's there in the beginning, he's there in the middle, and he's there. I mean, not at the end because it's before the original trilogy, but his meeting with Obi-Wan is so great. And like you said, it's a battle of wills, not a battle of skill or technique. And Maul, knowing that Luke is the chosen one, so great, because the only reason he survived so long was because he had this hatred for Obi-Wan. And at the end, they're happy with one another. They don't despise each other. They both know what's best for the galaxy. I've been talking for too long. Max, tell us why Darth Vader is the greatest Star Wars villain of all time, and I'm crazy.
And probably not just the greatest Star Wars villain, one of the best movie villains, cinematic villains we've ever gotten of all time.
If you're talking only movies, Darth Vader would absolutely be my number one.
But, and again, it's a fair point. Again, I do love Maul, really in Rebels, possibly more than Clone Wars. But as I said earlier, Darth Vader is easily number one. Joe is saying one of the most important. He is the most important Star Wars character, in my opinion, we've ever gotten before, because he literally is the chosen one. Seems like Palpatine manipulated Shmi and made Anakin. And Anakin is I don't really like him in the prequels, honestly. The first one I hate him in, Jake Lloyd, in my opinion, not really great. Second one, again, I can't stand Attack of the Clones. He's very annoying, very bratty, rushed love story. 3, it starts to kick into gear. And then you get the original trilogy. What a great character he is. His relationship with Luke is so powerful in each movie. He kills Obi-Wan in New Hope. Super emotional once you understand their backstory. My favorite lightsaber battle of all time is Vader versus Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. Easily my favorite lightsaber battle of all time on Mustafar. What a freaking battle, because he's Vader in my opinion at that point of time. The fact that him in Return of the Jedi is really, really great as well. His battle with Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi is really, really great. The fact that he finds out he had a twin sister at the end of Return of the Jedi is really powerful. And I'll bring in one of the questions too. The Rusty's work saying, what are the most least satisfying villain deaths? He might have one of the most satisfying deaths in Star Wars. It's a very powerful death. He actually chooses the right side at the end of the day and becomes the chosen one by killing we thought was killing Palpatine. And the fact that he dies, it made a lot of sense, but it was done very, very powerfully because him and Luke, and the fact that you get to see him finally underneath the mask, what a powerful character he is. There's a reason why he's literally brought up in every movie in Star Wars, in the sequel trilogy, even though he's not even in it at all. He's brought up in Force Awakens, he's brought up in Last Jedi, and heavily in Rise of Skywalker. What a powerful character. Again, in the TV shows, also awesome in Rebels. Darth Vader is a great, great character in Rebels. He and in Clone Wars, obviously he's Anakin. You see a lot of darkness in Anakin in the prequels, but really mostly in Clone Wars as well. So what a character, and and easily my number one with him and Palpatine 1 and 2. But that will end our list. So let's get into some of the questions really quick because we are about to run out of time here, Joe. So we have, I love Java's. Okay, Zero the Hutt. Yeah, Zero the Hutt. Do you like Zero the Hutt, Joe?
God, no. Zero is awful. I hate Zero. Spelled just if you need to Google it, I believe it's Ziro.
Yeah, correct.
God, I mean, I think Zero is a character I love to hate. I don't despise and like Jesus Christ, I can't do this. Just like anytime Zero's on screen, I'm like, this guy for real? We're taking this guy seriously? But somehow he is like a very powerful part of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and really the Clone Wars movie, he's really a big part of.
Yes. I mean, I do also find I was talking about how great Cad Bane's first appearance is. That whole thing was just to free Zero. Yeah. And it's so dumb. But also, I don't know. I love Cad.
Also, his love story with the singer from Return of the Jedi was pretty bad as well. That twist didn't work, how Zero dies.
Zero dies, right? I don't remember.
Yeah, he gets shot by the girl who sang in the special edition of Return of the Jedi.
Most satisfying villain death right there.
No. We talk about that in Star Wars. Here's what I'll say. I said Vader probably is the most satisfying for me, or Maul. I think both of them are right there. The least satisfying one, honestly, is Kylo or Ben.
That's very true.
His death did not make a lot of sense. Why Rey could do the same thing as Kylo, but Rey could easily survive. And Kylo's death, like when it happened in the theater, I was like, wait, what just happened? He died? I was
like, traded his life for her?
I couldn't believe he died. Weird.
They had enough time to kiss, which made it even worse.
Yeah, they had time to kiss, and then he died. Woof. Terrible death.
For most satisfying, least satisfying, I think I'm thinking of it a little bit differently, which is villains I was like, yes, they died. Like most satisfying in that way. But yeah, I would have to agree. And if we're going by just like what like best villain deaths, like got to be Vader. Maul is up there. Like I said, I love Savaj's, especially because of the relationship with Maul. Anything else?
Palpatine's a really satisfying death for Vader as well. Palpatine's death. Look at this. Clovis?
Oh, yeah. I thought of Clovis I just remembered Clovis while I was making my list because I was just trying to think of Clone Wars villains. Like, that guy.
Clovis felt very generic just to be a third wheel with Anakin and Padme. Just not a huge fan. George Lucas is the greatest villain in Star Wars. Definitely not. Because George Lucas created Star Wars. We wouldn't be here. Now, here's the thing about George Lucas. As I said, I told a lot of people who I talk Star Wars with. I probably told Joe this before. George Lucas is a great storyteller. Like, he has great stories laid out. Like, even in the prequels, his world that he sets up are great. Is he a great director? Definitely not. Is he a good writer for a script? Pretty bad at that. And you can definitely tell in the Clone Wars and even in New Hope that the script isn't that good at all.
I will also say that I think a lot of people justify George Lucas being terrible as his work on the prequels, stuff like that. But I think if Rise of Skywalker has proven anything, it's that anyone can make a bad Star Wars movie. Anyone could make a good Star Wars movie. I think that's very important to think about just in terms of movies in general, which is like people make mistakes.
He created the world that we're talking about right now. These are his characters. These are his worlds that he creates. And again, as I said, he's a great storyteller. Like, he created Star Wars. Can he write a good script? Probably not. And he's not a good director. And it's not a problem. That's why Empire Strikes Back is one of the greatest movies of all time. Because one, he didn't direct it. He didn't write the script. He just created the story of the movie. And if you let those great directors like Irwin Kershner do it, it's a great movie, man. It's a great movie. I think George Lucas' dog was the character design inspiration. Well, that could be true, but I always love the fact that General Grievous's cough was actually George Lucas's cough. I always find that really, really funny. But that's how we're going to end the show, talking about George Lucas creating Star Wars. Thank you guys so much for joining. Before we go, I have to tell you guys a couple of things on the YouTube channel. Before you go, guys, please leave a like button. Comment down below. The comment section should be opening up very soon once we are done here. Share the video to anyone you know who likes Star Wars. That's a great way to get more people on to Max Talk Movies, and to subscribe on our climb towards 100 subscribers. We're 21 away. Let's keep building up. I have a pretty busy week here on the channel. Monday I'll be doing my Lovecraft Country spoiler review. I believe Tuesday or Wednesday I'll be doing my ranking. Tuesday, actually, my Tuesday will be doing my ranking for all the movies I saw in the month of September. Wednesday, there's a new Netflix movie with Jim Parsons that I'll be reviewing. Thursday, I'll be giving you my review for Raised by Wolves. And Friday, I have Ted Lasso. So basically now, every day starting from Monday through Saturday, I'm going to have videos for the channel. Joe and I will be back next week. As of now, we could do Star Wars Heroes. There's a lot of Star Wars heroes. Joe, you want to add on there?
Max, if you don't mind, can I just plug something?
Go right ahead, dude.
I usually don't have anything to plug, and I feel like I just want to plug something. For anybody who's watching, I'm not sponsored, but go watch Infinity Train and or Cobra Kai on HBO Max and Netflix, respectively. I think they're both very good shows, and I think they deserve a lot of love and support.
Netflix, you hear that? Can you sponsor me? We'll plug your stuff. We'll plug your stuff.
Max.
We'll plug your stuff on the. I watch Netflix movies every week, guys. I mean, I'm here, but also a plug for me is also in the comment section down below, in the description. Sorry, in the description. There are my social media platforms for Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Follow me, DM me on all of those different services. Once again, that was Joe Baldwin, and I am Max We're going to see you next week, every Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time here on the Max Talks Movies YouTube channel.